of you have had a cup of coffee this morning? Large majority of you. Now, I'm not asking this because I need to know how much energy I need to give back to you. I want to take a quick poll. How many of you would have given up that cup of coffee for the internet? If you had to pick coffee or internet, who's with coffee? Okay, that is like 5%. Who's with the internet? That is the rest of you. So you are very much like, I don't know where most of you are from. I'm assuming like North America, but you are much like Europe. Lee Cruz, who is a former European commissioner for the digital agenda, would say Europeans would rather go without coffee or sex than without the internet, which I think is interesting, right? And probably true, right? And the reason for that is because when we use the internet for so many things, right? We use it to try and buy tickets to Hamilton, right? Good luck with that. You use it to stream videos, use it to buy content, you use it for searching the internet, use it for social media, Google, Facebook, right? But we have a big problem. Google and Facebook, we're starting to not trust them anymore. We're starting to not trust them anymore. So there was a survey done by Profit, and this was really fascinating. It said, when asked to rate Facebook as a brand I can depend on, respondents ranked it at 133. There were 132 companies they felt they could depend on more, right? But as a brand I can trust, Facebook fell lower than 200. 199 other companies were more trusted than Facebook, and Google did slightly better. They're at 130. But if you think about all of the information that you share with Google and Facebook, it's probably up there for the top handful of companies that you share your most amount of information with. Maybe credit cards and banks are the other. And you don't trust them. You trust 199 other companies. That should be scary, right? So we're starting to get into a trust problem with some of these more powerful companies. And in 2008, we elected a new president, President Barack Obama, but we also had a trust problem on Wall Street. At that same time, there was a paper that was released by Satoshi Nakamoto, Bitcoin, peer-to-peer electronic cash system. It's about a 14-page white paper. How many of you read the paper? It's actually a lot. So you guys are quite familiar with Bitcoin. I think we had about like 10% of the people raise their hand. It's actually not that hard of a read. It's not super technical. If you want to understand Bitcoin and blockchain and really a lot of the source of this technology, I actually encourage you to read it. I encourage you to read it as like a helpful understanding of how this works and why this works. But it was released in 2008, and Bitcoin started in 2009. Bitcoin was the first cryptocurrency. When we were at a point in history when trust was quite low in financial institutions. And so, just briefly, because I think a lot of you have probably understand Bitcoin, but in cryptocurrencies in general, but just quite simply, kind of what Salim was saying, where you can take an image and just replicate it, a near infinite amount of times, and the marginal cost is, near zero, right? With photos, for example, just take a photo of this room, put it online, send it to friends, send it to all of you, text, email, etc. Right? That's wonderful. But the same can't be said for money or something of value. You can't just take a digital dollar and then make it 3 digital dollars. All of a sudden, you would have no value, right? And so I think sometimes it's harder to understand. So I like to talk in concert tickets, right? How many of you have bought a concert ticket online or an event ticket online? Yeah? And it's either come from a like StubHub, an aggregator like StubHub or Ticketmaster, or sometimes you buy it on Craigslist or you get it from a friend, they email it to you. But how many of you, when you walk up to the gate and you have your printed ticket, 95% of you are sure that when you scan it, it'll be green, but there's these little butterflies in your stomach, right? Little 5% of you, right? I see knowing head nods, that you feel a little nervous that ticket actually might have been duplicated, right? Because it's easy to do, it's just a PDF, and someone could have sent it to 10 other people, right? So you lose that ability to trust. But what you can do is you could you could connect an electronic concert ticket to a nanocent, like a very fraction of a Bitcoin, and then you can transfer it from my wallet to your wallet, right? And then the importance of that is that you can look at the blockchain, you can see that, I was the original owner of this ticket, and now you are the owner of that ticket, and we can all see that, right? So there's this powerful way to take digital assets from concert tickets to songs, movies, and even money. Well, it's actually kind of the main point was money, to transfer it from one person to another without a centralized intermediary, right? And that's where we start to get the power of decentralization. And some people think Bitcoin is crazy, right? Or cryptocurrencies are crazy. I would argue that the world we live in today is crazy, right? And I'll just give you an example, right? So, Jose, right? So with Jose, if I say, Jose, I want to send you an email, right? So I would say, great, Brian, this is my email address, and just send me whatever you need to send me. Great, done, right? I don't ask him anything else. I don't ask him, hey, Jose, are you going to check that on your iPhone? You going to check that on Outlook? You going to check that on Hotmail, Gmail? I don't ask him any of these questions. I don't have to, right? Now, if I say, Jose, thanks for that concert ticket. Let me send you $20 for it, right? We'd play a game. We play a game of 20 questions, right? We say, hey, are you on PayPal? He's like, I don't know, I forgot my password. And he'd be like, hey, Brian, are you on Venmo? I'm like, no, I'm over the age of 30, right? And then we'd be like, hey, do you use Square Cash? Like, come on, man, no one uses Square Cash, right? And we'll just kind of like, hope Square's not here. We'll just kind of play this game back and forth, right? Then we'll finally get to a point where it's like, all right, what's your bank account number, your ID number, et cetera, et cetera. Well, you get it in 3 days. Instead of that $20, you'll get $17.50, whatever it is, right? But we'll have to play this game if we want to transfer money. Right? Now, with cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, all I ask them for is like something similar to an email address, right? Your QR code, right? Or your wallet address. And we just transfer it. Doesn't matter if he uses Zappo and I use Circle or et cetera. It doesn't matter the application you use. You can just transfer it from one person to another seamlessly. And that starts to create this thing called decentralized trust, right? Decentralized trust becomes important because when you have decentralized trust, everything moves to the protocol, and then the applications are where the innovation happens, and people trust the protocol. And so similarly, when we had this, we were talking about email, we're basically just using SMTP as this open and interoperable protocol. It doesn't matter what browser he uses, right? And you basically compete on features for your email client or features on your web browser, for example. And similarly, what will start to happen is the intermediaries start to lose power, because the intermediary basically is the protocol, the free and open one that you can use. And then companies don't compete on the network effect they had within your PayPal network or with your Venmo network or your Square Cash network. You start to compete on all of the features that you have. And that becomes powerful. You start to eliminate intermediaries, and then you start to get business decentralized. Some people don't say, they say, I don't really, really understand why we have to have these decentralized ledgers. So I want to kind of give you a couple of examples. But what we start to do is start to lower friction in the transfer of our data, start to lower friction on choosing which network you choose to work on. You start to lose the friction of distribution. I'll start to give you a few of those examples of how this starts to be impacted, not just in finance, but in other industries as well. And when that friction starts to get reduced, this is kind of funny, so, or sad, I don't know which one. As it turns out, in Europe, in the UK, people were more loyal to their bank than their partner. I think the people spent 17 years with their bank and about 11 years with their partner, right? Because there's a lot of friction involved. You don't want to change your bank, right? It's tied to your direct deposit. You may have a loan with them, right? There's a lot of friction in switching. But the big question is, do we trust these institutions, right? That's what everyone's asking. Are we trusting these institutions? And the question is, this came from the Edelman Trust Barometer. Very little has changed since 2008. And the only industry trusted less than the finance and banking industry, and just by a hair's breadth, is the media, right? So we're pretty loyal to these, not to banks and to the different finance apparatuses that you're using, not because you trust them, but because of all of this great friction. But what's happening with blockchain technology is all of a sudden we're reducing the friction to change. When you start to reduce the friction to change, the friction is no longer your competitive advantage, and you start to need to move to trust. And so some people think that blockchain is a competitive threat. I actually think it's an opportunity to reinstill the trust that's been lost. This is an opportunity because things like this do not create trust, right? Here's a clear example when you don't have control of the ledger, right? When financial institutions have control of the ledger, what the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau found out, CFPB, is that they started to reorder checks. So let's say you wrote 3 checks in one day, maybe your utility bill, your rent check, and I don't know, your credit card bill, right? You send them in, the bank receives them, and they reorder them. They reorder them highest amount to lowest amount, so that it increases the likelihood that you're charged an overdraft fee, right? So you're reordering the ledger. See what happens when you start to lose control of the ledger? When a corporation has control of the ledger, that's why you can see momentum for people wanting to trust a decentralized ledger where a company's financial interest is not put over your interest. Bitcoin was built for people. Bitcoin was built for people, not for companies. I know that sounds strange because more than $1 billion has been invested by venture capitalists into cryptocurrency, startups. Every major bank I know now has a research lab on cryptocurrencies and what they can do. But it was built for people, not for companies. And we need to remember this, to restore that trust that has been lost. I'll just give you a couple more examples of where a decentralized ledger would have been a little better than a corporate ledger. So I asked earlier if you guys bought tickets online. I assume many of you trust StubHub. As it turns out, maybe you shouldn't. So a couple of fans, 4 of them, they thought, hey, this could be Kobe's last season, right? This could be Kobe's last season. I said, okay, we're going to buy 4 tickets to the last Lakers game of the season. They did. I think the ticket price was $195. And then, 3 weeks later, Kobe announced that he was going to retire. Ticket shot up 664% to nearly $1,500. StubHub sent them an email and said, we are sorry, but those tickets that you bought, originally for $195, are no longer yours. We made a mistake, and we're going to take them back. But I'm sorry, I'll give you a $100 credit. I'll give you a $100 credit. We don't care about your $100 credit. We care about going to the game. We're true Kobe fans, right? But that's a clear example of when an organization like StubHub owns the ledger, and that ticket is not attached to that nanocent in your wallet, and a company can pull those tickets back, where consumers can lose, right? You can start to understand why consumers would want the power of a decentralized ledger. Or data. So as it turns out, the average American adult has about 16 doctors in their lifetime, 16 doctors. What that really means is you have your information spread across 16 databases, right? You have 16 different electronic healthcare records. Who cares if they're electronic if you don't have access to them? If they're spread out across all these places, you're duplicating medical tests, et cetera. You're not exchanging the information you have. You don't have control over your information. So one new project that we just created over at the MIT Media Lab, where I work, is a project called MedRec. It was started by a few students, Ariel, Asif, Tiago, and Professor Andy Lippman. And what they did is they used an Ethereum blockchain to start to connect the databases. And what that did is it puts the control of access to your information in the hands of you. And you can start to push out that information in different ways. And one of the benefits of that, which becomes interesting, is then you know that question they always ask you: do you have a history in your family of XYZ illness? And you kind of know your parents. You definitely don't know your grandparents unless they passed away as a result. But you really don't know their medical history, right? So now you can start to pass that down as well, right? So it starts to bring it in, but it puts the power in you, not in the electronic health record company or their doctor. It gives you the power to start to control your data, right? Which is incredibly important. We just saw with Facebook, for example, the big hubbub over with Facebook is there's a liberal bias in the articles that are being pushed out, right? So whether that's true or not, up for debate. I certainly don't know. But I think the real concern should be: are you living in an information bubble, right? Is the information that's being pushed to you, right, based on all of the data that you give to Facebook, is that being influenced? Are you just living in your own little echo chamber of your friends who may have similar points of view, right? And if you had control of your data that you give to a company like Facebook, could there be another browser? Could there be another social media network that basically looks at that data and your friends' data that maybe has a different point of view, a different algorithm, right? That gives you more optionality, right, than depending on the algorithm that Facebook may use, right? I think that optionality is incredibly important. That ownership of your data becomes incredibly important. If you had an account with MySpace or Friendster and you imported all of your information and spent a lot of time as a music artist building that up, and then the network goes away, you've lost a lot of time, right, that you've put into that. You can't take that data and move it to another network, right? So how do you build up some of that resiliency, right? That's hard for Facebook as a business model, starts to decentralize it, but that means they have to become more competitive, right? That's not a bad thing. And people might start to trust them more if they have absolute control over their information and portability of their information, which could be done using blockchain. This is what we're doing with medical records. Or another example. Any of you guys try to see Star Wars over the holidays? No, this is not as geeky of an audience as I hoped. Well, I did, but before that, I wanted to go back and revisit and rewatch a lot of the first episodes. And so, but then what I quickly realized is, as we move from a DVD to Apple TV, for example, or Roku, and I love my Apple TV, but what I started to realize is that we started to lose ownership of our content. So when I went to go, you do the dance, right? When you want to catch a movie or something like that, the dance is, you go to Netflix, see if they can stream it. You go to iTunes, you go to Amazon, right? You do the dance, right? And you kind of figure out, okay, where's it cheapest, right? Can I rent it here, whatever? Well, I didn't want to pay $100 to watch all the episodes. I just wanted to rent it, right? $20 maybe is fair. And so I could only buy it. I could only buy it at Amazon. I could only buy it at iTunes for $100. That's it, right? So I said, okay, I'm going to outsmart the system here. I'm going to look up a DVD rental store. DVD rental store. I live in Washington, D.C., right? So I was in Yelp, and I just typed DVD rental store, right? There's one DVD rental store in D.C. It's called Capitol Video Sales. They're not highly rated, apparently. 1.5 stars. Only 2 reviews. And it's quite expensive, apparently, $3 signs. But so I called them. I said, hey, I imagine Star Wars is quite popular right now. So just want to make sure you have it in stock, right? They said, sir, we don't have it in stock. So it turns out you've called an adult video store. Right? So I got really mad, and I wrote a blog post about this. And we cheered the downfall of Blockbuster and the tyranny of late fees. But what we also did is we centralized on iTunes, we centralized on Amazon, we centralized on Netflix, which gives us limited options when we want to be able to purchase things or have more competition in terms of pricing. Same thing for Kindle versus Nook. If you buy your book with Amazon, you're not going to be able to read it on a different device. So now we're locked into Kindle if you buy all of your books on Kindle. As it turns out, you cannot sell your iTunes track. So when you hit that button buy, It's actually a lie. It's a lifetime lease, right? So a judge said it's actually illegal in the United States to sell your iTunes tracks. So you no longer own your content anymore. When you own that DVD, when you own that CD, when you own that book, you could give it to someone else. You could rent it to someone else. You could sell it to someone else. You no longer have that option. Funny story, and when I was researching and getting really mad about this blog post, I started like doing some Google searches. Turns out Bruce Willis has like 300,000 songs on iTunes that he's bought. He like tried to give them to his daughter Rimmer and couldn't. It was just crazy, right? And as it turns out, when I started digging a little deeper about Star Wars, every time Star Wars has been re-released, it's been changed. It has been changed. The content has been changed. And so when you first saw it in theaters, when you first saw it on VHS, then you saw it on DVD or Blu-ray, and now you've streamed it, every single time it's actually been changed. There's a whole list of the changes that have happened with every release on Wikipedia. It's fascinating, right? So now, when you don't own your content, you're actually subject to that content actually changing in the future, right? And we talk about decentralization, we talk about Star Wars, and people say, okay, well, great, Brian, these all sound like really kooky, crazy ideas. When will this happen? And I don't know, with music or movies, maybe like if Beyonce just drops her album tomorrow night on the blockchain or Beyonce chain or whatever you want to call it, like, yeah, that would like move some markets pretty quickly, and people would start to do it. So you have to kind of like figure out in your industry, well, where are my levers, right? Where are my levers? Who could make this change tomorrow? Right? And one thing that if you said, Brian, let's take this a step further. We're going to create a completely decentralized organization. This is crazy idea called a decentralized autonomous organization, the DAO. Any of you heard of this? Yeah. Kind of crazy, right? It's this autonomous organization, and I'll walk through what it is shortly, but I don't know. I've heard a lot of explanations. I don't understand half of them. This is kind of the best one I can come up with. I'm sure there's caveats to all of this stuff. It's just so new that it's constantly changing. I get different answers from like a researcher at Cornell, from like someone on the Ethereum board. So this is so new that like we're still trying to figure this all out. But the best way I kind of think about this, just personally, is that it's crowdfunding meets venture capital bound by smart contracts. Right? What I mean by that is crowdfunding, right? You've got Kickstarter, you've got Indiegogo, for example, and they'll put up projects, and if you contribute, you'll get some form of generally non-monetary reward. You'll be the first one to be able to download that movie that you're helping support, or you'll get the product that you buy at a discounted price, etc. But and you're kind of voting with your money for whether this project should exist or not, and that's great. Sometimes we're starting to hear a lot more stories when those products don't deliver. But with venture capital, right, y'all know how that works. Just kind of put some money in, you get some equity back. But the key difference here is kind of like it's a combination where, and I'll kind of walk through how it works in a second. But it sounded like science fiction, but it's raised more than $168 million. Which now makes it the biggest crowdfunding project ever, from what I understand. Apparently, it's been raised by, I think, 20,000 wallets. They're estimating it's about 10,000 shareholders in this company. It's quite the seed round. Half of it has come from 70 addresses, interestingly. But you kind of do the math, that means like individuals have invested more than $1 million on average each into this decentralized autonomous organization. So here's how it works. You have a proposal, right? A proposal can come from anyone who has bought Ether, which basically gives you a vote. The more Ether or shares that you buy, the more votes that you have. So anyone can make a proposal for a business idea that they have. And then you have vigorous debate for about 2 weeks or so on a different forum or on Slack or wherever about it. And then people vote. You can vote yes, no, or abstain. The project is developed by a contractor or a third party, kind of like the the person or a group of people that you're investing in to deliver this product that was proposed. It's all bound by smart contracts, and then that contractor, you set up different stages of the contract so they can pull out the money or stop paying that person or group of people if it's not going well. And then if it does go well, then they'll deploy. And then you'll have your revenue share breakdown, but then a certain amount of profit will be returned to the shareholders, and they'll be able to benefit from that profit, right, in theory. But this is now starting to ask really interesting questions, right? With any new emerging technology, you start to ask really interesting questions. The first one, generally regulatory. So is it a security, right? Should the SEC be involved, right? Is there a bias towards funding? So a group of researchers from Cornell are saying that there is a bias towards funding yes versus no. The general idea is most people are incentivized to say yes. If you say no, then you're still committing to the project, and then you could lose. And so people will generally abstain. It's a really interesting paper that I encourage you to read by these researchers at Cornell. Can you withdraw your funds? So apparently you can withdraw your funds as well. So even though $168 million has been raised, apparently that money can be pulled out as well. Until you vote. So it's all quite fascinating to think about this. And you say, well, when is this going to happen? This is happening a lot quicker than we think, right? Your business models can start to be decentralized quicker than you think. So this is a picture of I was taken a little over a year ago when I was in Iraq. I think sometimes we really struggle with, especially in like North America and Europe, we really struggle with, wow, this just seems like so far out there. But look at the faces of the expression. This was just like mind-blowing because when you have countries or institutions that have very low trust, there are huge opportunities for people. We kind of have good rule of law here, but institutions that in theory we can trust, but when you don't have that, computer code, decentralized organizations, trusting encryption and mining and all of the things that are making up the ability to trust cryptocurrencies becomes incredibly important when you have low faith in institutions, whether they be government or corporations. And so I find that when I explain this in developing nations, the pickup and the understanding and the ideas that are generated are actually happening a lot quicker. I think actually a lot of the innovation is going to happen in the developing world, not here. So if you have a company that is spread throughout the world, and I've talked to a few CEOs about this, they're actually looking at putting their research labs in developing nations because they can see the problems a lot quicker. And then they've seen this previously, and then they take those innovations and bring them to Europe, for example. And I think, with the internet, we saw communication exponentially increase. You're messaging your friends, more frequently, more efficiently. And I think similarly with cryptocurrencies, with blockchain, for example, we'll see transactions exponentially increase because you'll be able to do it peer-to-peer. The friction will decrease. The cost significantly decreases, and it'll spread just like the internet. And I think ultimately, in the future, that survey may change. And we might say Europeans would rather go without coffee or sex than without the blockchain for the trust that you get. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it.